Mr. Cleverly, as we sit here right now, will Kemi Bade not be the next Prime Minister?
Yeah, I think that increasingly, when people realise that the Conservatives are the only party in Parliament that take the economic situation seriously, that take our defence situation seriously, and that actually have a plan to reduce public spending, reduce the tax burden and unlock the economy, I think they will reward us at the ballot box and we'll see Kemi Bade not go through the door at number 10.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, a politics podcast that tries to make sense of the chaos without adding to the noise. I'm Alex Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. Every week we take the temperature of British and global politics, then try to bring it down just enough so you can actually think straight. We're like the podcasting version of portable aircon, but without the energy bill.
From Westminster wranglings to international flare-ups, if it matters, annoys us, or smells of spin, we're on it. No firebrands, no flag waving, just facts, insight, and the occasional well-timed eye roll.
So whether you're marching, muttering, or just marinating in disbelief, stick with us as we begin another Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot, a podcast that treats political noise the way a Brit treats sunshine, with suspicion, sunscreen and a raised eyebrow. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi, here to gently prise the microphone from the shoutiest corners of the news cycle and replace it with something a little more thoughtful.
Are you talking about me?
Moo?
Who's me? Are you talking about me? Am I the shouty corner? Am I the shouty corner?
If you have
Shut
to
up,
ask.
both of you. I'm producer Kenny with the foolish, fruitless and frankly waste of time job. No, let's just not do that.
K45 for Kenny.
And meanwhile, I'm producer Kenny with the fruitless aim of trying to keep these two on time and on topic.
This week, how do you solve a problem like migration? A consensus seems to be forming among many politicians that the problem with this country is people who like this country so much, they actually choose it. Is there a way of moving either back from or beyond this toxic framing?
And school's out for summer. As Parliament goes into recess, the opposition tries to have a reshuffle, only to find a pack full of zeros. Reform UK tries to cause a kerfuffle by declaring Britain is lawless, in a tribute to Xena Warrior Princess, I guess. And Suella Braverman, remember her, reveals her solution to all of us having far too many rights.
To help us, and finally, making her Quiet Riot debut, it's our old friend, CEO of migrant and refugee rights charity Praxis, and everyone's favourite living Brummie, it's Minnie Roman. Welcome, Minnie! Thanks for having me, guys.
Minnie, we're recording this the day after the news that Ozzy Osbourne has died. Are Brummies hoping for a state funeral? Or was his pro-Israel stance a bit in the way?
Yeah, I mean, look, we do not have many famous Brummies, and he is one of them. So I think there is a general fondness for Ozzy Osbourne, but he has done a lot of weird things.
Yeah.
Domestic violence, biting heads off bats, things like that. So I don't think we're going to fully claim him.
Has anybody got a favourite Ozzy Osbourne story? Just so many
you
of
sound
them.
like you do.
I've got a couple. I mean, there's so many that involve animals. I think it's just the story of life, isn't it? I think my favourite one is Ozzy Osbourne, despite everybody thinking he's a Satanist, he was a member of the Church of England at some point in his life anyway. And back in the day, the vicar came round to visit, and his wife, and I think it was his first wife, so that would have been Thelma, she did the right thing, and the vicar came in and sat down and she made the vicar a cup of tea, gave him a piece of cake. What she didn't know was that Ozzy had laced the cake with Afghan-strength hash. And within minutes, the vicar was off his face and, boom, unconscious. He passed out. So apparently they had to drive him home in a state of stupor and semi-consciousness. And it took the vicar 3 days to recover. He was off his face so much that it was 3 days before he was compos mentis. And it was such a trip he'd been on, he didn't remember a damn thing about what had happened.
He discovered God.
He did. The Lord works in very mysterious ways.
My favourite Ozzy Osbourne story has to be the latest Ozzy, which is Andrew Yang. You remember him, presidential candidate in the Republican Party tweeted, R.I.P. Ozzy Osbourne, a true American original.
Birmingham, Alabama.
I can see why American politicians might claim him, to be fair.
Yeah. Quiet riot. This week, we've seen alarming scenes in Epping, a quiet Essex town thrown into national headlines as far-right groups descended in protest against housing asylum seekers in the local area. Earlier this month, an asylum seeker was arrested and charged with offences against a teenager and an adult in the town 8 days after arriving in the UK, allegedly via a boat. Hadush Kabatu, 38, from Ethiopia, has denied these allegations of 3 counts of sexual assault, 1 count of enticing a girl to engage in sexual activity, and 1 count of harassment without violence. He was remanded in custody. In Epping, over the last week, violence has been threatened, tensions are high, and the scenes eerily echoed the worst moments of last summer's riots. As we approach the anniversary of that unrest, the question is, are we learning anything, or are we simply letting the cycle repeat? At the same time, the UK and France are progressing a new one-in, one-out migration understanding, a deal that seems designed more for headlines than humanity. It's the latest move in a now familiar pattern of deterrence-first policy. The government's recent white paper outlines a migration narrative that feels cut from the same cloth, stripped of empathy, focused on numbers, not people, and more interested in reassuring voters that they'll get tough than in building a fair or functional asylum system. We're told the grown-ups are back in charge, but so far, the politics of immigration remains a race to the bottom. So today, we're going to ask the harder questions. What should a humane, practical migration policy look like? How do we move from punishment to planning? And what can the UK learn from other countries who've adopted alternative approaches, ones that work, cost less, and crucially, don't feed far-right narrative?
It's not for me to silence or to try and to say to people what they should or shouldn't say. My appeal to people, whether they're the leader of a national party or just somebody who's got a comment to make, is please consider the consequences in the real world of your actions. Is what you are saying going to cause violence or make it work for the people of Epping, for the officers, the staff members at the hotel, the residents, or indeed the local community? That's what you've got to think about. It's not for me to try and sanction or to limit what they say. Of course, where people break the law and that there is a clear breach of law, we will investigate those matters.
Minnie, let's start with Epping. Are we witnessing the normalisation of far-right intimidation tactics in the UK? And if so, how should political leaders and indeed the police be responding?
I think we are witnessing that. And I think what we're also witnessing is increased organisation from the far right. I don't think it's a coincidence that this is happening at Epping at this time of the year. It's 1 year on from the anniversary of the 3 children dying in Southport. And they are organised. They have funding, they have resource, and they have a government narrative, which in many, many ways empowers them to behave like this. And I think when you have politicians like Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer coming out and saying that these are legitimate concerns, coupled with the violence, it gives people a sort of idea that this behaviour is okay. And I think, we are seeing across the country pockets of organisation from the far right, physically and online. And those two things are very dangerous and they're completely uncontrolled by the Labour government at the moment. So it's an increasingly volatile situation, which doesn't feel to me anyone has under control.
And talk to us a bit about the work that you do at Praxis, because you really are at the coalface of all of this, right?
Yeah, so Praxis provides immigration advice. We're one of the biggest providers of free immigration advice across London. And our client base are migrants who are at risk of destitution or homelessness. So the way that it usually works is where we identify someone as being homeless or rough sleeping or coming to a local authority needing support. The reason is often because of their immigration status and because the system doesn't allow them to kind of access the welfare support or support that you might need to get yourself out of that
Or work.
situation. Yeah, or work. And so we rectify people's immigration status as a means to stop them experiencing extreme vulnerability.
Have you been getting busier in recent years? Have you noticed a difference?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, massively. I think we see an increase in kind of all kinds of migrants experiencing homelessness, and that's because the system is getting more and more hostile and more difficult to access because legal aid has been cut. And so it's not necessarily that there are, increasing dangerous numbers of migrants, but it's actually that the system doesn't support them to live healthy, functional, safe lives in the UK.
And so they are then more visible to people in their community and more obviously homeless, more obviously desperate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And potentially therefore likely to do things that the local community don't like. I'm really keen to know about public attitude on immigration. And we talk about this a bit on the show, don't we, Alex? That it feels like if you could just stop the boats, then people wouldn't really care about immigration per se. And it's this lack of agency and the feeling of lost control of the border, even though arrivals by small boats makes up a relatively tiny proportion of overall immigration numbers. So, Minnie, what's your view that if they could at least be seen to be getting control of the boat crossings across the Channel, which are horrific for all involved, let's face it, would the British public be satiated? Or is there just a wider anti-immigrant sentiment that very few politicians are prepared to stand up and tackle?
I think we've gotten to such a bad point that reversing on this stuff is going to be really, really difficult. Now, I think we have never talked about channel crossings in the public narrative in the sense of protecting people from dying making those journeys, or in the sense of them accessing their basic human rights. Now, the conversation around human rights and safety is completely invisible. And what politicians are sort of banking on is this idea that they can get away with all of the terrible things that are happening to the British public, kind of cost of living crisis, concerns about housing, by putting the blame on those communities. And I think that narrative is very, very entrenched. So it would need both sides of those conversations to happen. You would need to see visibly that people are not crossing, but because they've been able to make safe journeys to the UK, and because we are accepting that we have a place in an international refugee protection system, but that also they can see real action on the things that the British public really does have a right to be concerned about. And that takes the government, Labour, any of the political parties really, to come forward with an exciting agenda that actually touches on those issues.
Yeah. And Alex, one in, one out with the UK and France. What is that really going to mean in practice? I mean, are we looking at a broader shift in how the UK is trying to manage irregular, quote unquote, migration? Or is it just political triangulation? Because the white paper itself adopts much more of the Conservative framing around control and deterrence. I mean, we talked about the numbers of 50 a week, whatever, being, not a drop in the ocean, but could they
sure, but still
escalate
like 46 more than the Rwanda scheme managed
to get off the ground,
for 700 million in 3 years. And also it's important to say that this is kind of a pilot scheme, so it's a test to see if it works and how it works. I don't agree with your framing. I think this is, if it works, it's quite an elegant solution, because what it means is it opens a legal way of trying to make the crossing. Because if you're then talking about, if it works and it's increased to 1,000 in, 1,000 out, then you are talking about a safe and legal route, effectively. It kind of says that way of coming over doesn't work, but this does. And the net result in terms of numbers is 0 for both countries. So I think it's quite a smart thing to be doing. If your aim is to stop that really dangerous journey, and your taking of the political temperature is that voters just would not wear a safe and legal route being established right now in France on its own, basically, then this is quite, I think, a smart way around it, actually.
And Minnie, the white paper presumably practices trawl through it, they look for the good stuff, get horrified at the bad. What's your kind of overall assessment of it?
I mean, as far as immigration white papers go, it is quite an anodyne paper generally, in that its spark is stronger than its bite. There are things in there that are really concerning and that I think will make the situation much, much worse. Particularly things on access to public funds for migrants and like length of citizenship and routes to settlement, because what that is doing is keeping migrant communities in a sort of limbo for as long as possible in the most expensive way. And
as a second-class citizen.
As a second-class citizen, which basically stops them from being able to kind of become active parts of our communities, but also increases all the same problems that we're already seeing. Extending the 10-year route to settlement is a really, really silly policy that we've been campaigning against for years and years, and the government is just extending it.
Yeah. Also, it kind of feeds into the rhetoric that this is a problem to be fixed, that people moving here is an issue that needs addressing. My real hesitation with it is that, just like the Conservative policy before it, the feature it shares most directly, I think, is that it's dishonest. Just like the Conservative policy is dishonest, it seeks to give people the illusion of control, and people can smell bullshit. And so maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, maybe it'll make things worse, because I think the bottom line is that people are annoyed at a government that says we will cut immigration to the tens of thousands and then ends up with record numbers.
Oh, I know. Always mad.
And not just record numbers, like cynically injected into the economy as a counterbalance for a disastrous Brexit, because that's what happened. They knew the economy was going to suffer significantly and all the predictions were going to turn out right. And the easiest way of getting that not to happen was to shove 1 million people's product more onto the GDP. So that's what they did.
Minnie, are there countries doing migration management better that Britain could learn from, or is this kind of a universally awful problem?
I don't think there's anywhere that's absolutely brilliant, because what underpins a lot of this is just structural racism, right? And so there are countries that have better policies in terms of kind of welcoming asylum seekers, etc. There are places like Spain and Portugal and even Ireland who have better systems for undocumented people. So, for example, Portugal and Spain have the right to work for anyone who's undocumented. And then once you have proved that you've been working for 5 years, you can access settlement. And that's great, right? Why shouldn't people be able to work and access the economy and contribute to the economy and then be active citizens? And a lot of that comes down to the fact that most places do not have what we have, which is the hostile environment. And I think that is a set of policies that, while the Tories were talking about asylum, we had the Windrush scandal. The base of that was the hostile environment, which is a set of policies which doesn't allow migrants to have access to the same rights as British citizens. And it also increases racial discrimination in society. We pivoted to talking about asylum seekers. And then, meanwhile, migrants in the entire country are having a terrible experience. And the narrative is completely against black and brown people who are living here. So other countries don't have that system. And that is notoriously one of the things that we are famous for, terrible, mean, racist policies.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
And Minnie, what about integration policies that would help a community absorb and accept immigrant numbers arriving into their area more? I'm thinking about things like the opposite of no recourse to public funds. I'm thinking about active investment in language skills, cultural integration skills.
It does come down to resource. And I think this is a historic problem. Local authorities in this country have had their funding cut again and again and again. And when the local authority cannot put up libraries for its communities, cannot afford leisure centres, cannot do the kind of, you can't even have a fireworks night anymore because there's no funding. Then communities cannot spend time together. They cannot work together. They cannot just understand each other. And I really don't think, I mean, I sort of hate the term integration because, you know, the people in this country who are not integrated are the politicians and the Eton masses.
Absolutely.
And they are the ones who need to integrate with the general population. I think generally where communities have resource and are not struggling, you do find welcoming situations. You do find cities of sanctuary where people want to get to know their neighbours. And I think we sort of saw this happening a little bit in COVID when it was like coronavirus was a common enemy, right?
Yeah.
And we needed to protect each other and look after each other. And communities did that. And there was resource put into that from communities and from the government. And that improved things for a short while in terms of who your neighbour is and who provides your services and what the benefits are of migrants working in your communities. And that's all been taken away, decimated. There's no moves from government to re-implement things like that. And therefore the situation won't improve.
Do we need an alternative common enemy?
I was thinking about this the other day and I was like, gosh, alien invasion?
Yeah.
I vote for that.
We'll probably get our next pandemic soon enough.
Yeah.
So what's going on with the Epping stuff now? Because
The Bell Hotel.
there seems to be a story that they've been moved to a hotel in Canary Wharf and there's protests developing there.
So there's a lot of misinformation. Obviously, the far right loves misinformation. And what is happening is that the people in Epping are going to be moved somewhere. And that is because their safety is at risk and they have every right to do that within the asylum system. At the same time, there is an asylum hotel opening in Canary Wharf due to another hotel in Canary Wharf closing down. So there has been some connection that perhaps those people will be moved there. But that is unconfirmed, unsubstantiated, and is pretty dangerous for both the opening of the new hotel and the next place that those people go to.
Yeah. Maybe we should encourage them to protest outside the empty one. No, maybe the government says to them.
Everyone can spread
Maybe
a
they
bit of
should be putting out
misinformation.
their own misinformation.
Yeah.
Sort of go there. You know.
Here's a great big empty field you could also go to.
I mean, listen, better raves have started in more innocuous ways. But is there an element of planning that could have gone better? Because I saw someone interviewing loads of people in the Epping area. And what really struck me was that they didn't seem to be sort of far-right, extreme people. And all of them were saying, we don't welcome the Nigel Farages and the
Oh, really?
Tommy Robinsons.
I
Yeah.
watched a lot of Vox Pops going, Tommy, please come, you're the only one that can. Really young people as well, like young women.
I accept that. I saw a set of clips that showed the opposite. And I just wonder whether choosing that location so close to a school was something that could have been avoided by slightly better planning. Because in the current environment, like if I'm in the local council, that would seem obvious to me that it would cause an issue.
The reality is, the thing we agree on is that asylum hotels do not work. They are not nice places. They are not appropriate accommodation. And it is a tinderbox for the local community and for the migrants in them. And what really does need to happen is community housing. Like people just need to be integrated, if you want to use that term, from the moment that they come into the country. Because we treat them as criminals, as dangerous, as people to be avoided. If you then put people into one big accommodation, which can be targeted by the far right, you're going to create a dangerous situation. So it's actually national policy that is causing this kind of chaos. And, you know, previously we had community asylum housing in 10, 15 years ago. This has all been pushed in this direction. And it's not because we don't have accommodation, it's a political standpoint.
Minnie, how can listeners support the work of Praxis? And are there any practical things people can do who are really worried about a riot being emulated again this year? I mean, we effectively saw a pogrom last year, people wanting to torch hotels containing asylum seekers. Rather than just sort of despair at everything, what would you recommend our listeners do?
Yeah, look, I would love to say things like donate to Praxis, which we would obviously
And we will leave a link. We will leave a link in the show notes.
Say things like donate to
I
Praxis.
definitely should, and the staff at Praxis will say to me, you definitely should say that. But I think actually this is a bigger issue, and I feel really, really passionately and concerned about the direction of the country. And I think one of the things that I'm finding myself really destabilising is the fact that people can see these things happening, but also don't think there is a threat or rise of far-right populism taking place in the country at the same time. And I really think the only way to combat that kind of far-right populism is to accept it might be coming and try to think about ways in which to combat it. And that does mean not only challenging it in your local community, but it means supporting organisations and charities and businesses locally who are together on this issue. And I think we really need to start thinking about solidarity and what that looks like and preparation for the future.
We were talking about this last week.
We
had Christina Pagel on, and one of the biggest obstacles to get over is the idea that it couldn't happen here, you know, and the moment you accept that actually it could and it kind of is.
It is, yeah.
And then you shift your stance completely.
Yeah.
Quiet, riot. Right then, time to enter that magical corner of the news cycle where everything is offensive, nothing is sacred, and absolutely no one is asking for any of it. Yes, it's time once again for Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Alex, what fresh cultural chaos have you unearthed for us this week? Has anyone been triggered? Who's pretending to be triggered? Which public services are apparently being radicalised by the woke now?
This story was sent in by a listener in Bristol Live about a dad who turned up to collect his daughter from school in a full-on gorilla costume. And the school kind of said to him, don't do that. It's not appropriate. And so he's had a massive rant calling the school woke and saying that how can it be a safeguarding concern, etc., etc. Fun local story. As is the case with all these things, in the intervening couple of days, it's turned from a fun local story into a big splash in the Mail, the Sun, the Express, even the Telegraph. It's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Let me read you a little bit of the story, actually. He says that he got a snotty text from the school saying that he's upset some of the children, basically.
One or two of the teachers, I don't imagine as well.
And that it's also not an appropriate thing to do. Apparently, he'd gone the previous day wearing a horse's head.
Why? I mean, is his rationale to make his daughter laugh?
He's just a fun guy, you know? He's a fun guy.
Not a sinister weirdo.
He's just a fun dad. Why do you want to ban that?
So he picked the child up, dressed up as a gorilla.
Yeah. And I imagine, reading between the lines, that he probably went rah to loads of kids and scared the fucking life out of them. He says, I messaged them back and they didn't reply. I just thought it was ridiculous. Safeguarding is about the safety of kids. A dad in a gorilla outfit is not a safeguarding issue. It's taking the piss. I've had loads of messages of support saying, what on earth is this country coming to? A kid can identify as a cat, but a dad can't dress up as a gorilla. It's a bit woke, is his final comment. Now, I had a little think about it, and it was not difficult to see what the problem may be here. Because if every parent decides to go in full fucking Halloween kit...
How do you know that the right
How do you know who's
the right
picking up the kids?
Yeah.
If everyone is in a fucking mask, if everyone is in an animal head, how can the teachers keep an eye who's picking up these 7-year-old girls? And yet not a single one of the newspapers that I cited has landed on this really, really obvious point.
And these same papers are the ones that will go after women wearing a veil or, a burqa and a cup, whatever, that will not like that. It's the very same fucking people.
And nobody has asked the school for comment. I mean, it's
terrible journalism.
There's another aspect of the journalism that just, in the original version of this story, the father described himself as being a self-trained horse dentist.
Yes.
What in the name of all that's holy is how do you self-train to be a horse dentist?
If you're a horse owner, please check the qualification
If
credentials.
your horse dentist
of
turns up
anyone.
wearing a gorilla outfit, think twice.
But they
If
have
he
like
turns up
massive
wearing a
file
horse's
things.
head is when you need to worry.
Gummy horse's head.
I mean, I think the thing is, though, why did the local newspaper pick this up? That's my main
Because
question.
it got them clicks.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
clicks,
why,
yeah.
that's the plain answer. But for all the nationals to then pick it
Okay.
up verbatim, without putting the really basic point that actually that might be a problem. People turning up in disguise to pick up 6-year-old kids might not be a great thing.
Yeah.
Okay, last week it was the little girl in her Union Jack dress who was the poster girl and story for the right on, you can't do anything in schools these days. This week it's a man in a gorilla costume. What are we predicting the manufactured outrage will be to do with woke schools next week?
Well, they're in summer break now, aren't they?
Oh, okay.
Most of
They'll
them,
find a way to keep
They'll
it
find a
going.
way.
They'll
Of
find a
course
way.
they'll find a way.
Maybe it's teacher's turn next.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
a lazy teacher has done over the summer holidays.
Yes. Oh,
I
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
That might well be
Mhm.
the case.
Yeah.
Maybe they will go and volunteer in some refugee centre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be a story.
Well, thank you, Alex, and listeners. Do send any instances of Wokey Dokiness that you find on the web to quietriotpod@gmail.com. Quiet Riot.
Grandpa's here!
Hank's always helping out, Grandpa style. Now he's treating his prostate cancer with help from Xtandi enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
Quiet Riot.
Fresh from her no benefits for migrants triumph, Kemi Badenoch had a reshuffle this week, declaring a new phase for the party, with a shadow cabinet that matches her ambition to continue the Tories' transformation into a shadow of the former selves, presumably. No place in the top 10 for her good friend Suella Braverman, who was doing the media rounds by complete coincidence at the same time, I'm sure, announcing her plan for the UK to leave the European Convention of Human Rights, because human rights are woke, obviously. Described by her as a clear, meticulously detailed, no-nonsense legal blueprint to restore our sovereignty. Not to be outdone, Reform UK meanwhile unveiled their big plan to cut crime in half by sending anyone who nicks a Kinder Bueno to El Salvador, pointing out that it costs more to keep someone in prison than to send a child to Eton. Here's an idea: send prisoners to Eton. I mean, it's cheaper, why not? It'll be a useful exchange programme. Naomi, what do we glean, first of all, from the reshuffle?
The reshuffle, she said she would not do ahead of the next election. Well, it's kind of like out with the old and in with the old.
In with the old.
Right? So bringing back Cleverly and then just rejigging a few others like Hollinrake and Huddleston into different roles. But, I mean, to be honest, she just didn't really make many changes. You know, most people have stayed in place.
But Monday morning when you haven't done the shopping and all you've got to eat is all the leftovers from the last 4 days, isn't it? Put a bit of rice in with that. What have we got? We've got extra Cleverly. Oh, God. Cleverly curry it is then.
But Mel Stride is still Shadow Chancellor. Patel, much to everybody's dismay, is
Astonishingly
still
crisp filth.
weird filth. It is still Shadow Home. Jenrick is still at Justice. So you're left wondering why bother. Now, of course, all the rumours were there was going to be a coup. She was not long for the world. The polling results they had in May and poor performances at PMQs and defections and donors leaving them, all the rest of it meant that she had to do something. Well, she didn't really do very much. So if that coup was serious, I can't see that this quells it. I don't think it was some big cleverly campaign that has now been nixed. But Alex,
I keep thinking you're going to add something, that you're using it as an adjective. She shuffled in cleverly. Who?
Yeah.
How cleverly?
James, yeah. And I do think it's interesting that to have been bought off from leading a coup against her, that he wouldn't have demanded one of the 4 big jobs. And Alex, I think you've got a theory about why he would have settled for housing.
I do have a theory. I think it's going to be quite high profile because he gets to do PMQs with Angela Rayner. And I think it also puts him in a position to go for London mayor. I think that's where he's headed.
Tory candidate for London mayor.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
Well, there we go.
What were her options? Like, do you know anyone in the bank benches?
But that's it.
Nobody from the new intake was brought into the fold.
You do end up going down the list and going, who? Yeah. I've never heard of them.
Well, yeah, but that might be an advantage for the Conservative Party. Do you know what I mean? You want people that no one's heard of.
Why Tom Hunt got suspended? It's been not reported. There's been no leaks anywhere, which makes me really
no, it's not even
tingly. What's really going on there?
You won't even see it in the reports of the reshuffle.
No.
You have to do a spot the 9 differences with the shadow cabinet before and the shadow cabinet after to notice that he's missing.
Yeah.
James cleverly did the media round on Wednesday morning and seemed to take to the more populist flavour of things like a duck to water. Let's have a little listen.
Angela Rayner has said she sees the country fraying at the edges and that a big part of that's down to immigration. Is that something you agree with her on?
I think it rings a bit hollow when, she was one of the people that took the knee during the BLM protests. She, the Labour Party, the Prime Minister have jumped on every bandwagon that's come along, and they have spent so much time seeming to be on the side of the people who don't play by the rules, who jump the queue, who abuse the system. And now that they're in government, she is saying, oh, well, I think, society is fracturing. So, yes, we all collectively need to do something about it. And a good start would be for the Labour Party to say, you know what? There is one set of rules in the UK, one set of laws, and everyone abides by them, and everyone is expected to abide by them, rather than this 2-tier system that we've seen almost as soon as they took office.
How dangerous is it to throw race relations into the migration mix right now?
I mean, I think it's present, he's throwing it into the mix, but it's exactly what the Tories have been doing. Labour in some ways are doing it, and obviously Reform is doing it. That is present, but it is quite a thing to compare BLM with the migration crisis. I mean, there was a really big far-right response to the BLM protests, and I think what he is actually doing is just trying to re-stoke that, and he's doing a sort of anti-woke soundbite, say as many things as I possibly can that I think that audience will listen to. So I'm not sure it's more than him trying to kind of capture that audience than it is
populism bingo.
I know, but in this slate of previous candidates, he was the only not that guy.
I think it just speaks to the direction of travel of things at the moment. I just think this rhetoric is coming up so much from everyone that they all think it works. They all think it's what people want to hear, so they're just going to do more of it.
So on that, do you think this kind of, it's quite American, this kind of polarisation. Do you think it can work in a country like the UK that, obviously you can't make generalisations, but the national character is a little bit more, I guess, introverted, a little bit more averse to that kind of in-your-face stuff. And also a very different electoral system with first past the post. So can it work here? Have they thought this through, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think what they're doing is testing. I think they're trying to see what will work in the UK, and what is happening in this country at the minute is that people are really, really desperate. You can feel that sense from people that they just want something different, something alternative. Now, I think if they really closely say we're copying Trump, that is not going to work. And actually, in Nigel Farage's speech, a journalist asked him that question, are you copying from Trump? And he said, no, But I am copying from Rudy Giuliani, who was obviously the New York mayor a couple of years ago, however many years ago. And I think that speaks to the fact that there is a consciousness that the British public don't want Trump, but they don't want to disassociate the fact that American politics has been offering something different.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it could work. I'm scared of everything working because I think the feeling in the country and where the media direction is going
it feels febrile.
It feels volatile.
I woke up with a really nagging anxiety this morning that we are
That's not a nice
potentially
thing to call your partner.
with a real sense that we're probably only a few weeks away from something really nasty happening.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And, I want to know whether we think that the issue around the precariat and it is easy to punch down and to hate immigrants when you're feeling poor and much harder to do it when the cost of living crisis isn't so acute, where you can afford your rent and to turn the heating on and to feed yourself and do nice things in your leisure time. But how monocausal that is, and can the progressive left overstate it in terms of the link between community cohesion and socioeconomic pressure? And I guess what I'm getting at is, do we have to at some point accept that the country is pretty racist and be much more honest about that and put more energy into tackling that rather than simply saying, if you grow the economy, Labour, people will stop wanting to riot?
I mean, weirdly, I don't think the country is very racist. I think the opposite. Like, I've lived in many places, and I think it's one of the least racist places I've been to. But it is very insular. So it is very you're in, you're out. There's always out groups. But I don't think the crux of it is actually race. I think the crux of it is these people know the rules, these people don't know the rules. We hate explaining the rules. Therefore, we don't want these other people.
I think the issue that we never really talk about is class in this country. And it is class division that is the main cause of all of these things that I think, and it's kind of ignored and pushed into the conversation about racism. And obviously race and class are integrated and racism does exist in the country. But I do think that progressive parties are not getting enough airtime, but they also are not speaking loudly about their vision. And going back to America, look at what's happened in New York with Zohran Mamdani. Like, he has a very clear vision. He's a very clear communicator in the same way that Farage is a really clear communicator. And we are missing that on the left. We're missing strong voices who are able to go out and say, well, like, yeah, of course you're having a shit time. Of course you're having a shit time. But this isn't the solution. And here are other things that we could be doing. And this is, something that I think is
I could agree with you completely. Like, I hate that we're basically serfs.
Yeah.
The Brits are such obsequious little shits, doffing our cap, heralding the entrenched privilege of the monarchy in such a grotesque way that people can't make the link between this bullshit peddler that went to Dulwich College and then became a banker and now tries to tell you that immigrants are the problem and not this entrenched privilege that he and his ilk have benefited from far more than anyone who's arrived on a boat has done in terms of what this country's offered them. And I mean, I find myself getting angry that we've never had a bloody general strike in this country in my lifetime and thinking, why do we tolerate this?
Yeah.
Like, come on, life is really shit for most people and it's kind of our fault.
Yeah. Yeah, but he does, I mean, I watch his speech, right? Objectively, I watched the speech this week and I was like, for fuck's sake, like, he just speaks like you're in the pub. He just,
very good
he really does. And it's not a myth about him. And he's just getting better and better at it. And you don't see politicians doing that. And the other thing that he does really, really effectively is he really champions his own cause. He says whatever it is he wants to say. Yeah. He has no fear whatsoever.
No filter.
No filter, no fear. And he tells a lot of lies, which I'm not advocating for the left to do. But the progressive end of our political system is very wholesome, it's very earnest, and we, constantly trying to kind of fact check ourselves rather than
that's the point.
Yeah,
and fact check each other.
Fact check each other
So
rather
we
than
slap the strong voices down on our side.
Yeah.
That's why they're not there, because the carrot and stick throughout their political career is that if you say things clearly and loudly and you believe in them, you get kicked.
Mm-hmm. Maybe for the first time in a long time, the threat of far-right populism might bring us all back together again, because it is really, really quite scary at the minute. And I think that's one of the things that I'm seeing amongst kind of campaigners from all different types of sectors, is that actually everyone is saying, well, we can't tolerate this now. We're getting to this point where it is volatile. It is going to be dangerous if we don't do something. And now we have something common that we might unite against. So I'm hopeful that the organisation on our side might improve, but we need the same resources as the right. And that is ultimately...
And they're getting
problem.
foreign money.
Yeah.
Quiet riot. Quiet riot.
James cleverly also had this to say about rape gangs.
Isn't there one legal system that applies to everyone? The same one that applies?
Well, there should be. I mean, there is. There is. But we saw with the rape gangs scandal, we saw Labour voices for years basically turning a blind eye to this for fear of accusations of racism. And the rules should be simple. People that rape and abuse young girls should be brought to justice, and people should move heaven and earth to make that happen. And yet what we saw for an extended period of time is people not doing that.
If that is a legitimate criticism, you must therefore hold your hands up and wish that as Home Secretary you called for a national statutory inquiry, as has now happened under the Labour government when you were Home Secretary and you failed to do so.
Well, as soon as I was appointed as Home Secretary, one of the first meetings I had was with the author of the Angelini report. I would have liked more time as Home Secretary to drive these things through, but this was something I took incredibly seriously.
Do you regret not going further faster?
Well, I think what we've seen in the Labour Party is the work that we started, despite all their rhetoric and their criticism of me for not moving faster as Home Secretary. As soon as they took the reins, they slowed down even further. I would love to have done more. I would have loved to have had more time. But the Labour Party in government started to reverse. Not only did they fail to move forward, they started to move backwards, and it took Conservatives to hold their feet to the fire.
You look down the conversation menu right now, and basically it's EDL talking points from 10 years ago, the whole list. But will the next election be fought on this stuff? Or will things like economy, health, education naturally begin to recover up people's priorities? Because it seems to me that we are also lionizing the reform effect at the moment. Actually, they've hit a bit of a ceiling in the polls, and they're going slightly backwards. And maybe that 28-30% is the natural ceiling for that kind of politics. And whenever they get more challenged to say, how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to do this? They get in real trouble. And I just think, will that actually, the closer we get to the election, I think people will have more of an expectation to see a real plan, won't they?
The answer to your question is no. I think it will be fought on these terms, because I don't think that Labour is doing anything different to reform on this topic. They are just saying the same things in a slightly different way. There is no differentiation really between Labour, the Tories and Reform in their narrative on migrants and asylum seekers. It's all, if you want to put it shortly, they are bad, they shouldn't come here. And that just creates the environment in which Reform are fertile. I also think with Labour, they have set themselves some very key metrics, right? They had some strategies that they wanted to do and they wanted to implement. They had a child poverty strategy, homelessness strategy, violence against women and girls strategy, which you can see they're thinking about funding and resourcing, etc. But will they achieve any of the things that they've set out whilst they are currently trying to climb down on all these other areas on the economy and cost of living crisis? And I think if people do not see real improvement in their day-to-day life, then these are the terms in which the election will be fought. And I can't currently see anything that indicates to me that people are really going to see that in the next 2 years, because that's when the campaign starts, really. You need 2 years, right? And so are we there?
So on top of that, we've got the debate about leaving the ECHR, rearing its head again. Naomi, is this now becoming basically inevitable? Does that feel to it a little bit? Not because it's a brilliant idea, obviously it's a shit idea, but I see very few politicians out there defending it. Like, I say very few, I can't think of one.
On the one hand, Braverman, who has long led the charge on this, and she'll say, it was me as Attorney General that she first mooted it. She's not in government, and she's no longer a government MP. But I just don't think we can be under any illusion that leaving the ECHR is the next rallying cry for all of those who back Brexit and those who still wish to pull the UK even further away from the EU and away from shared liberal pro-democracy values. You know, it's tick, we're done. Step one, next thing, step two.
It links so neatly to all their complaints about immigration and all of that.
And sovereignty and no. So I don't think it's worth name-checking Braverman directly when calling it out, because I think that will give her relevance and attention that she is clearly craving so badly and cannot quite believe she is not leader of her party. But I think it's high time that other former Attorney Generals like Dominic Grieve and others step up and start to make the positive case, without mentioning her, for the ECHR. And, you know, it would be nice if the Labour government did so too. They have repeatedly said they're committed to it, but that is quite different from making a positive case for it and to try and reinstill the reasons for it, why we joined it, why it's important, what it offers people. So, you know, I think that is part of a really big constitutional conversation that we're not having. There was the joint committee on a Bill of Rights that pushed back on the Tory government's proposed Bill of Rights, which would effectively be tearing up the Human Rights Act, replacing it with a Bill of Rights, and that was all wrapped up in, and therefore we could leave the Convention on Human Rights because we'd have our own sovereign act overseeing it all. And that committee pushed back quite strongly a couple of years ago and said, thin end of the wedge for eroding human rights completely. Minnie will know far more about it and have watched it in real time more closely than I did. But I think beware, even moderate Tories peddling things like, well, OK, let's be... Can we meet in the middle here? Just supposing if we did leave the convention because we had a written constitution with a Bill of Rights, like, wouldn't you like that, Naomi, you constitutional reform loving liberal? And I think that is a fucking big trap to eroding human rights. And Minnie's nodding violently at me.
Yeah, but we had Christina in this studio last week, and she was saying that the good chap system of government is just supremely vulnerable to someone like Trump. Like if we think it's going fast over there, that he's eroding stuff over there fast. I mean, here you could do it in a week, basically, if you had the party
But I mean,
behind
that's the
you.
thing. I mean,
So is there maybe some safety into looking at constitutional reform and entrenching these things into a British document?
We need to take a step back on the ECHR.
Let's
take a step back on the ECHR, because I think, I mean, probably the listeners to this podcast will all be convinced anyway that we should stay in it and that there's a benefit to it. Now, you've got Nigel Farage and the Tories basically saying that this is about immigration and this is about foreign criminals and deportation.
Rwanda would have worked if ECHR hadn't stopped.
Rwanda is now apparently a magnificent success that was never allowed to to take off.
A bit like Brexit.
Yeah. And what do the general public understand about the ECHR? Absolutely nothing. And I think the thing that we need to communicate, or that government needs to communicate, but for obvious reasons won't do it, is what is its purpose? Okay, yes, it gives us human rights, but also it holds the government accountable. And that is the main thing about the ECHR. Do you want your government to get away with things, or do you want to have a mechanism in which to hold them accountable for wrongs that they might do in this country? And that message is simply not given to people in any way, shape or form. And if you did that and also said, would you want a system in which perhaps Nigel Farage wins this election and has no mechanism to hold, there is no mechanism to hold him accountable?
If you are a Nigel reform lover, Jeremy Corbyn, would you, he could nationalise your industry tomorrow, and all your big bonus package that you get as part of your corporate job at the moment would no longer be a thing. Would you want him to be able to be held to account by a higher order?
It's such a bear trap. This is my own personal view, that the ECHR is a huge problem because it's such an appalling catch-22. The biggest thing that the ECHR offers as far as the next general election is concerned is a really clear, simple point of difference between one group of political people who understand the headline stuff and another group who we are asking to explain in long and complicated terms and very yawn-inducing terms why it's important. And we know this approach doesn't work. People believe bullshit.
Yeah, but the other approach doesn't work either, Kenny. This was exactly the situation with the EU membership before the 2015 election. And Cameron thought, really clever, I'm going to take this point away from them. I'm going to make it a non-contention by promising a referendum, because then, I've snookered you.
And if you remember how appalling our side of the debate was at that time, utterly lacking in teeth and focus.
All of that is completely true. But also, if there's an atmosphere where you sense a population just wants to kick something, you give them something to kick, they'll fucking kick it.
I mean, the polls, YouGov did a poll recently, didn't they, on staying in the ECHR, and 51 or something % of the population is like, keep it. And it's almost 25 on leave and don't know. And it is that don't know that is going to make the difference. And what they don't know is what it actually does. And they don't have anyone who is giving them a simple message on it, which is, this is about government accountability. It's about working with our European partners. And we need it for your human rights. Do you want less human rights? Surely not. But in a communicable way,
I mean, the problem is everyone wants less human rights for the others.
Else.
Reform UK, meanwhile, presented their plans for crime, policing and justice to the few intrepid journalists who risked life and limb on the mean streets of London to get there. Nigel Farage has promised to increase capacity with Nightingale prisons, pointing to the pop-up hospitals of the pandemic. Here's what he thought of those in 2021.
Folks, it's time for a rethink. When the NHS was set up in the late 1940s, it wasn't set up that we should protect it. It was set up so that it could protect us. And you know what? We do so every day through our taxes. Massive taxes. Remember the Nightingale hospitals that were built at rapid speed? Where are they? They've all gone. How much more NHS capacity do we have now than we had 2 years ago? Do you know what the answer is? None.
What do we think of this big top approach to prisons, Minnie?
I think Florence Nightingale would be rolling in her grave, to be quite honest. It's really difficult because he's obviously picking up a sense in the public, right? He's instilling a sense in the public that things are scary and everyone's dangerous and everyone's a criminal, especially in London, which is like a very Russian strategy, right? Create chaos, create fear, and then come in as the savior and say that you're going to fix it. He was all over the place in that press conference. He was simultaneously saying, we're going to set up these prisons and it's going to be great and we're going to dictate that, these areas are going to take them on and be absolutely happy because crime is going to go down.
Without naming the areas.
And of course, local communities would never, ever accept that. MPs would never accept that in their local areas. And also, it wouldn't resolve any of the problems that he is proposing to fix. And at the same time, he was saying, stealing a phone 3 times or 1 time is you go to Nightingale prison. But actually, if a Reform MP commits sexual assault or takes cocaine, then we'll give them a second chance if they self-rehabilitate. And I think this is the thing that we need to kind of push on is He doesn't perform well when he is
Under
with
the
public, under the microscope,
Yeah.
and when he's challenged. He also doesn't perform well with the public when he is associated with kind of self-interest and corporate, corporate
and that
work.
was one of the things that brought Johnson down.
Yeah.
One rule for you and one rule for the rest of us. And if he is seen to be of that ilk of, no, my lot can get off from a bit of bum slapping in Parliament, but, God forbid an asylum seeker made eyes at a local girl,
or a 16-year-old steals a phone or, whatever, but I think the point is that, one of the things that is interesting about this crime conversation is about the statistics on crime. And that's been the main thing, right? Is the crime data correct? Can we trust it? Is it raising? Is it lowering? Who is saying what? And I think, again, this is the kind of conversation that is really difficult to have because data improves. Data is improving. Data collection is improving in the police, right? And different types of crime are going up and down. There's a huge amount of cybercrime happening, and the stats on that are that it's increasing massively, whereas in other areas it's going down. And then you've got things like sexual harassment, sexual violence. People are reporting more, and the police are taking those reports more seriously, and they're recording them in their stats. That is different to what was happening 10 years ago. So unless we sort of find the correct challenge to what he's saying, he can get away with this narrative in the interim.
Weirdly, I was looking into this and there's a name for it. It's called the crime rate perception gap.
Right.
If you compare the curve of certain crimes to people's perception of whether the curve is going up or down, there is a gap. And there is a gap that is opening. And the weird thing is that it wasn't always thus. Like up until the early 2000s, at least in the US and the UK that I looked at, there was like public perceptions of whether crime was going up and down was almost spot on with whether crime was actually going up or down. But afterwards, what you got is crime maybe go up a bit, go down a bit, flat a bit, but perception of more crime going steadily just up and up and up. And someone suggested that 9/11 is key. People both felt threatened in an extraordinary way that doesn't tally with statistics and data. But also it's maybe when we started letting in a little bit more conspiratorial thinking and what aren't they telling us, and a sort of distrust.
And we had the expenses scandal, which was real crime.
And the Iraq war and, and all those things kind of erode that trust.
So it's a low trust environment. We've moved from a country that had an assumption that I could trust you to the assumption I probably can't until you earn my trust.
I mean, I think there's a strategic reason why so much of his reforms crime policy is focused around London. And that is to establish this idea that the capital is dangerous and unstable. Now, to people in London, that reads as ridiculous. I haven't seen a balaclava in London ever.
Balaclava thing was amazing.
So to people in London, that reads as like ridiculous, puts us in a hoity-toity position. Oh, come on, that's not how it is. But to everyone outside of London, that reiterates this feeling of destabilisation, that the country's a mess, that the capital doesn't have it under control.
And actually, to be a Rudy Giuliani, to come in as a mayor and clean up dangerous New York, you have to have created the conditions that people believed it was dangerous. If it's not really.
And don't forget, London is a very diverse city with a diverse, political base as well. So it plays straight into the racist tropes as well.
But when I pointed this out, someone told me to Google London. And I was like, I live here. Do you know what? I use the tube every fucking day. If you couldn't move for balaclavas,
well,
I would have sort of noticed,
But this is what happened with Layla Cunningham, who's obviously the Reform councillor. She was a Tory councillor. She claims to be a prosecutor. There's some idea that she maybe isn't or wasn't. But she went on Sophie Ridge, right? And Sophie Ridge said to her, well, we're fine, aren't we? London is fine.
I'm angry at what they've done to this country. I'm born and raised here, and I love Britain, but it is unsafe. I was in Chicago and New York on holiday because my husband's American, and so many people were like, oh my God, we've heard about what's going on in London or in the UK. Are you guys okay? You know,
we are okay though, right? I mean, I live in London, like, you know.
You're okay because maybe you come to work in a taxi or an Uber, but, you know, for
I don't, by the way, but
No, for teenage, you know, if I'm on the train with my son and he sees someone in a balaclava, he is petrified. And that's been allowed to proliferate. And as a prosecutor, I know that knives are hidden in so many bushes. The fabric of the country's changed. People don't feel safe anymore.
That conversation in the public, when you watch it, as Londoners, you're like, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. But as someone outside, you're like, who do I trust? A journalist or a counsellor who gets this because they've been in my local area, not from London, and I am scared and I am afraid and things are unstable. And that is exactly what they're playing on.
As you point out, Farage under the microscope, Farage on detail, Farage being asked questions, not so great. Farage making a speech, terrific. And yet, his entire press announcement was pumped live and in full through every news channel. I genuinely don't get that. Like, they wouldn't do it for any other party. If Ed Davey made an announcement of crime tomorrow...
He tried to last week.
And he's got like 70-odd MPs, they wouldn't even carry it as end in other news. What do we do with that level of coverage when the calculation from most news organizations is that he gets viewership up because outrage kind of sells?
It's money. I hate to sound like, you know, a conspiracy theorist on the left, but it's money. He gets them money, he gets them viewers, he gets them clicks, and that's what it comes down to. Now, the answer is not as simple as like, the progressives need someone cool. But it kind of is. We've got no charisma. We've got no vibes going on.
He brings an audience.
He brings an audience, and we need to kind of find that, create that, develop that, invest in that. And in a way, that is kind of what happened with Jeremy Corbyn, right? There was a movement around him, whether or not you think that that movement did the right thing or that he did the right thing, but he was seen as cool. He was on stage at Glastonbury, he was in his local community, he was doing fun stuff. And that's the same tactic that Zoran Mamdani has in New York. And I think we just need to really think about how we capture that energy that is there on the left but is currently very tired and reinvigorate it.
Minnie for PM.
Not me, please.
Quiet Riot.
And that is it for this week's Quiet Riot. Minnie, a huge thank you for joining us today. It has taken far too long to get you on the show, so you must come back again very soon.
I will. Thank you so much for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you so much for spending a bit of your precious sanity on us today.
If you've enjoyed the show or even just mildly tolerated it, please do leave us a review or rating on your favourite podcast app. It helps more people find us and gives our egos the gentle nourishment they so clearly crave.
And if you do want to help keep the lights on and the microphones pointed at Westminster's nonsense, you can support us at ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod. Every little helps, and we promise never to spend it on crap from Temu. Well, I don't actually.
And don't forget to check out our curated bookshop. Link in the show notes, where we recommend brilliant political reads and get a small kickback to help fund the pod.
We'll be back over the weekend with more analysis, arguments, eye rolls, and unlikely optimism in our Sunday school episode.
Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay just the right amount of outrage.
We love you lots. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreev. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Soundstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
This week, to the tune of Sound of Music number, How Do You Solve a Problem Like Migration? A consensus...
That's a note for you, you
Oh, I
dick.
didn't know. Do you want me to sing it?
Yeah, that's why it's in square brackets and italic.
I don't... How does it go? Sing it.
How do you solve a problem like migration?